No arrest yet after a Duke student says she was attacked. The woman said she woke up Thursday in her on-campus apartment to a man with a knife.
3 star players on Duke's #1 ranked lacrosse team were accused of rape.
Fraternity at Duke University is suspended this morning. It stems from rape allegations.
The alleged sexual assault took place in a frat house.
Into a sexual assault near Duke University.
Charged with the felony rape
at Duke University.
That she was raped by a Duke basketball player.
Went to Duke.
Claims she was raped by
former Duke student Jeffrey
Accused
of sexually assaulting.
Duke University.
sexually assaulted a Duke student.
Title IX is a federal law that prohibits discrimination based on sex in any educational program or activity that receives federal financial assistance.
Some of the first cases were about women getting into military institutions. That was some of the first cases. And then there was a case where they didn't have a process. And this was like in the 70s, right? Like they didn't have a process for when someone was sexually assaulted. And that's when Title IX was used in the higher education setting.
The language of the law does not speak to sexual harassment or sexual assault, but through federal regulations, which of course are promulgated by an executive agency. Discrimination has been interpreted to mean harassment, and then within harassment, sexual assault.
Title IX lays out effectively a framework that we have to follow when it comes to sexual assault, sexual harassment, stalking.
When I'm made aware of an incident, I reach out to the person who made this statement. I tell them the process. Do they want a full investigation? Do they just want supportive measures? There's a university system and there's a legal system, and they're separate. We don't have the same infrastructure that the legal system has, right?
Here's the quote. It's from the Court of Appeals 1992, Wilson v. Bellamy. We're only one of 5 jurisdictions in the United States that has this doctrine called contributory negligence.
When an injury occurs, both the defendant and the plaintiff can be at fault. For example, in a car accident between car A and car B, car A's driver was speeding and car B's driver was driving under the influence. Both drivers are engaged in negligent risk-creating behavior. The negligence on the part of the injured plaintiff is called contributory negligence. A plaintiff contributes to his own injury when his behavior falls below what the reasonable person would have done to protect himself from injury. Today, only a few states still use the traditional harsh form of contributory negligence.
So if you go out with somebody and you guys are both drinking and you become drunk and the guy, he sexually assaults you, but it's like he's not listening to you say no. The fact that you let yourself get drunk means you don't have any claim against him.
Contributory negligence is a tenet in the civil legal systems, so there's no contributory negligence in our process. One of the big differences, right, is that the school process is under FERPA, and so there's privacy. If you go through the criminal system or the civil system, it's going to be public.
One, I think the legal system is terrifying. Getting the police involved, getting lawyers involved, having it be something that can be put publicly online is just something that really deters survivors from coming forward.
Easy way to think about it is that the Title IX process is part of an educational process, not a legal process. Like any federal law or things, they write them. I think they have good intention on when they write them, but how they're used in practicality is ever changing. But when the Obama administration was in, they were very, what people would say, complainant heavy, right? So they wanted to make sure that complainants had lots of rights because complainants didn't. And then we had the Trump administration. When they got in, they kind of were like, wow, we're really complainant heavy. And they kind of went too respondent heavy. Great example was during the Obama administration, if you were on a study abroad, an incident happened, the institution would still do the investigation, handle it, because you're still our student. 2020, they were like, no, if it happens internationally, that's not for you to worry about.
However, that conduct still meets the definition of sexual assault under Duke's policy that prohibits discrimination, harassment, and related misconduct. So that incident could still be addressed, could still be investigated.
SAP stands for Sexual Assault Prevention Team. We've been around for a really long time. We recently disaffiliated from Duke as all the fraternities and sororities disaffiliated. SHAPE is a student group. It stands for Sexual Harassment and Assault Prevention Education. When I came to Duke, everyone was affiliated. Duke had control over the fraternities and sororities. So if there was a case of sexual assault, they would have the right to investigate that organization and remove that member. Since disaffiliating, Duke has very much taken a hands-off approach. They don't want to engage with Durham IFC or Durham Panhandle.
Because Greek life is not a Duke program, it's Durham. It's completely defined, it's in Durham Panhandle and Durham IFC.
They're comprised of Duke students. So why does it matter if it's a group or not a group? It's still a Duke student that was a perpetrator, right?
If someone were to go to Duke and say this student had a violation of the conduct code by rape, by sexual assault, by roofing, I think they would take it seriously. But I have never personally been involved in a case where the victim wanted to go to Duke. The only power we have is our voice. We can't get involved in legal processes. That has to be up to adults. Most of us are 20 or younger. SAP doesn't have power to completely disband a fraternity or disband someone from that fraternity. We do like to have a good relationship with fraternities, so when these issues do happen, we can have an open line of communication with them and do what's best for the victim.
The Clery Act is essentially a consumer protection law that requires schools to report out on their crime statistics. The Violence Against Women Act has certain requirements about prevention and response. And so Clery and VAWA sort of work together to put those requirements on schools.
There are several ways that schools can evade having to report what is actually a clear picture of crime on campus or the risk to a student who could be vulnerable of attending this institution.
So they do have a report, but they haven't published anything after 2021. Every case they give it one sentence of what happened, but they don't really go into the detail. There is this sort of transparency, but not really to the point where I found in Yale's reports, where they have this table and they go case by case. There's no such thing for Duke.
We're required to do under VAWA and Clery some prevention to all incoming students and all new employees, and then we're supposed to also offer awareness and ongoing training as well.
I mean, Duke does one training. They do one training before coming to campus with the freshmen. They do like the online training, which is, I could rant on forever about how much I don't like that. They had the orientation leaders do trainings with the freshmen, but didn't train the orientation leaders or like the project directors.
And this dichotomy I noticed is that they place this sort of the responsibility of prevention solely on the students.
We like to do this thing called starting the conversation, which really creates like an open atmosphere to talk about these issues, because it can definitely be uncomfortable and hard to have these conversations.
A lot of it is focusing on like getting the bare bones definitions down, and this is especially for like freshmen and people that maybe have come from high schools without much any like sexual health education.
We implemented pre-rush training, so this happens to all of the freshmen, sophomores, anyone who's rushing before they even rush.
So it's a lot of planning, and we did it without any help from Duke. And it's a shame that they don't want to help us. The rest of our training then focuses on bystander intervention. And then the other big part of our prevention is like how to talk to your friends who are potential perpetrators.
And then we also do sober brother and sober sister trainings. It like gives people tangible tools to prevent assault from happening, whether that be measuring drinks with a shot cup to ensure that like only a certain amount of liquor is in the drinks, scanning parties, walking around, making sure everyone's okay, handing out water.
And then lastly, we'll talk about what resources are available on Duke's campus.
With advocacy or with education, let's go beyond that. The focus should be on why is wrongful sex wrong? Let's talk about what respecting each other's autonomy look like, not just asking them, do you want this? Do you want that?
These male students, members of the Greek organizations, entice women to their parties and give them sugary drinks, exactly what they say to them, and let's go somewhere quiet where we can talk, and just all the code words. It's really fascinating how it's a very planned, getting young women drunk so they can be sexually assaulted is a very planned, organized activity with instruction sheets, basically.